I still remember the moment my phone buzzed in my hand, late at night, the screen lighting up my dark bedroom, and the words that made my chest tighten so hard I thought I might actually stop breathing. Don't come to our house anymore. We want peace. That was it. No greeting, no explanation. Just that sentence from my own son, the boy I carried for 9 months. The child whose scraped knees I cleaned, whose nightmares I soothed, whose future I planned around before I ever planned my own. I stared at the message again and again, hoping my eyes were lying to me, hoping it was some cruel misunderstanding. My hands started shaking, my throat burned, and all I could think was, how did we get here? Was I really such a terrible mother that my own son would exile me from his life like this? Or was someone else pulling the strings behind him? Tell me honestly, if your child sent you a message like that, would you just accept it and disappear, or would you fight for the truth? I'm a woman in my late 50s now, but when all of this started, I was just a young mother trying to survive. I had my son, Adam, when I was 24. His father walked out before Adam could even form full sentences, leaving me alone with bills, diapers, and a heart full of fear. I worked 2 jobs for years, cleaning offices at night and working at a small clothing store during the day. I missed sleep, meals, and sometimes even my own reflection in the mirror. But I never missed showing up for my son. Every decision I made was about him. If I bought new shoes, it was because his old ones had holes. If I skipped meals, it was so he could have seconds. I wasn't perfect, but I loved him with every broken piece of me. Adam grew up kind, sensitive, and intelligent. He was the type of boy who'd bring home stray animals and beg me to let them stay. He hugged me openly even as a teenager, never embarrassed to be seen with his mother. When he went to college, I cried for days, not because I didn't want him to go, but because I knew that chapter of my life was ending. Still, I was proud. I supported him however I could, sending him food money even when I couldn't afford it, pretending everything was fine so he wouldn't worry about me. That's when he met her. Her name was Lily. At first, I thought she was lovely. She was polite, soft-spoken, always smiling, always calling me ma'am, and telling Adam how lucky he was to have such a caring mother. I remember the first time he brought her home for dinner. I cooked all day, nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. I wanted her to like me. I wanted my son's future partner to feel welcomed, not threatened. That night went well enough, or so I thought. Lily complimented the food, laughed at my stories, even helped me clean up afterward. I went to bed feeling hopeful, thinking maybe, just maybe, I was gaining a daughter. But slowly, almost invisibly at first, things began to change. Adam started calling less. When he did call, he sounded distracted, like he was somewhere else mentally. If I asked how he was doing, he'd give short answers. If I asked about Lily, he'd get defensive, as if my curiosity was an attack. I told myself I was imagining things. Mothers can be overbearing. I reminded myself. I didn't want to be that woman. After they got married, everything accelerated. Lily became the center of Adam's universe, which I understood to some extent. That's marriage, but I started noticing rules. Unspoken at first, then spoken very clearly. I couldn't visit without calling days in advance. I couldn't bring food without asking. I couldn't comment on their home, their routines, their choices. Once, when I suggested a different way to soothe their newborn daughter, Lily smiled tightly and said, "We're doing things our way." Adam stood beside her, silent. I felt myself shrinking in his presence. Every word I spoke felt like it needed approval. Every visit felt like a test I was failing. And still, I kept trying. I told myself this was temporary. New marriage, new baby, stress. I brought gifts. I offered help. I swallowed my pride when Lily corrected me in front of others, when she spoke to me like I was outdated, irrelevant. Then came the day everything broke. I had gone over to their house unannounced, which I admit now was a mistake. But my granddaughter had been sick, and Adam hadn't answered my calls. I was worried. A mother's worry doesn't shut off just because your child grows up. When Lily opened the door, her face hardened instantly. She told me it wasn't a good time. I said I just wanted to see the baby. Adam appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable, and said I should have called. I felt humiliated standing there, purse clutched to my chest, like a stranger begging entry. I left without seeing my granddaughter. After that, the distance turned into a wall. Calls went unanswered. Messages were read but ignored. Holidays came and went with vague excuses. And then, one quiet night, that message arrived. Don't come to our house anymore. We want peace. I replayed every moment of my life as a mother, searching for the crime that earned me this punishment. I cried until my pillow was soaked. I typed and deleted responses a dozen times. I wanted to scream, to beg, to demand answers. But all I sent back was, "What did I do?" He didn't respond. That silence hurt more than the message itself. It felt final, like a door slammed shut. I barely slept that night. My mind spiraled with questions. Was this really Adam speaking, or was Lily behind it? Had I crossed some invisible line without realizing it? Was I wrong for wanting to be involved in my son's life, or was I being slowly erased? The next morning, I decided I wouldn't just disappear quietly. Not yet, not without understanding the truth, because if this was truly my son's decision, I needed to know why. And if someone was manipulating him, then I owed it to myself and to him to fight for our relationship. I had no idea that this choice would lead to the most painful confrontation of my life, or that the woman who once smiled across my dinner table would soon become the reason I had to make a decision that would change our family forever. And that's where this story really begins. After that message, the days blurred together in a haze of confusion and quiet grief, the kind that doesn't scream but sits heavy in your chest from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep. I went to work, smiled at customers, nodded at neighbors, but inside I was unraveling. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart jumped, hoping it was Adam explaining everything, apologizing, telling me there had been a misunderstanding. But the screen stayed cruelly silent. I started replaying every interaction I'd had with Lily, every look, every comment, every moment where her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I wondered how long this had been building without me realizing it. As women, especially mothers, we're often taught to doubt ourselves first, to assume we've done something wrong, and I did exactly that. I asked myself if I had been too present, too caring, too involved. I asked myself if loving my son openly had somehow become a crime. A week passed before Adam finally replied to my message, and when he did, it wasn't the explanation I had been praying for. He wrote, "Mom, please respect our boundaries. This is what we need right now. Boundaries." That word felt like a knife. Boundaries between a mother and her child. When did love turn into something that needed fences around it? I typed back carefully, telling him I respected his feelings, but I needed to understand what had changed. His response was short and cold, saying that I made Lily uncomfortable, that my presence caused tension, that they were happier with distance. Reading those words felt like being told my existence was a problem. I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to remind him of who I was to him, but he didn't answer. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation deepened. I wasn't just losing my son. I was losing my identity. Being Adam's mother had been the core of my life for decades. Without that role, I felt hollow. Friends tried to comfort me, telling me adult children drift away, that marriages change dynamics, but this wasn't drifting. This was exile. One afternoon, I ran into Adam's childhood friend's mother at the grocery store. She asked how my granddaughter was doing, and I felt my throat tighten. I realized I didn't even know. I hadn't seen her in months. That night, I cried harder than I had since Adam was a baby. Not being allowed to love your own grandchild is a special kind of pain, especially for a woman who has poured her entire life into family. I decided to write Adam a letter, not a text, not an email, but a handwritten letter, the kind I used to write him when he was away at summer camp. I told him I loved him unconditionally, that I never intended to cause harm, that if I had crossed lines, I wanted to understand and learn. I reminded him of the nights I stayed up with him when he was sick, the sacrifices I made without ever telling him, not to guilt him, but to remind him of the bond we shared. I mailed it and waited. Weeks went by with no response. That silence started to feel intentional, strategic, and slowly, a terrible thought began to form in my mind. Lily wasn't just uncomfortable with me. She wanted me gone. Completely, I began noticing things I hadn't before. Mutual acquaintances stopped mentioning Adam around me. Invitations to family events dried up. I later learned Lily had been telling people I was toxic, that I interfered in their marriage, that I refused to respect boundaries. Those words spread quietly but effectively, painting me as a villain without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. As a woman, there's a particular humiliation in being labeled difficult or controlling, especially when all you've done is care. Those labels stick, they follow you, and Lily wore them like armor, using them to justify cutting me out. I felt gaslighted, like my reality was being rewritten without my consent. The breaking point came when I found out Lily was pregnant again. I didn't hear it from Adam. I heard it from a cousin who assumed I already knew. That's when something inside me snapped. I realized that if I stayed silent, I would disappear entirely from my son's life, from my grandchildren's lives. And I wasn't ready to accept that fate without fighting for the truth. I decided to confront Adam face to face. I knew showing up uninvited had already been framed as unacceptable. But this felt bigger than rules. This was about my existence as his mother. I rehearsed what I would say 100 times, promising myself I wouldn't accuse or attack. I just wanted honesty. When I arrived at their house, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Lily opened the door again, and this time she didn't even try to hide her annoyance. She told me Adam was busy. I asked if I could just speak to him for 5 minutes. She hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. Adam looked shocked to see me, then irritated. That expression hurt more than any words. I told him I needed clarity. I asked him directly if he truly wanted me out of his life. He avoided my eyes, glanced at Lily, and said this was what was best for his family. His family. I realized then that I was no longer included in that definition. I asked Lily what I had done to make her so uncomfortable, hoping she might finally say it out loud. She crossed her arms and told me calmly that I undermined her, that I acted like I knew better, that my presence reminded her she wasn't the most important woman in Adam's life. That last sentence hung in the air like poison. It wasn't about boundaries, it was about control, it was about insecurity. And suddenly everything made sense. I left their house shaking, but also strangely clear-headed. I finally understood what I was up against. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be fixed with apologies. This was a power struggle, and I was losing. Or at least, I had been losing quietly. That night, I asked myself a question I never thought I'd have to ask. How far was I willing to go to reclaim my place in my son's life? Was I willing to risk being painted as the villain even more than I already was? Or should I accept the role they'd assigned me and fade into the background? Before I could answer that, something happened that forced my hand and pushed this situation from heartbreaking to unbearable. Something involving my granddaughter that made it impossible for me to stay silent any longer. And when that happened, I knew there was no turning back. What happened next is something I still struggle to talk about without my hands trembling. Because it crossed a line that, once crossed, changes you as a woman forever. A few days after that confrontation, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something in my chest told me I had to. It was my granddaughter's daycare teacher. She asked me, very casually, if everything was okay at home, because my granddaughter had been crying uncontrollably for days and asking for grandma. Repeatedly, hearing that broke something open inside me. I asked why she was calling me and not Adam or Lily, and she hesitated before saying Lily had listed me as an emergency contact, but never answered her phone. That alone told me more than I wanted to know. I thanked the teacher and hung up, my heart racing, my thoughts spiraling. For the first time, it wasn't just about me being excluded or disrespected. It was about a child, a little girl who didn't understand adult power games, who missed someone she loved and was being denied that comfort. As a mother and grandmother, that hit me in the deepest, most primal place. I called Adam immediately. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted him, telling him about the daycare call, telling him his daughter was asking for me. The response came hours later, and it was cold, almost rehearsed. He told me Lily was handling things, that their daughter was fine, and that I was overreacting. Overreacting, that word echoed in my head. I wondered when caring became overreacting and when silence became peace. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing my granddaughter's face, the way she used to run into my arms, the way she called me her safe hug. I felt powerless, and that helplessness turned slowly into resolve. I realized that if I didn't stand up now, this pattern would repeat forever. I would be cut out of birthdays, graduations, memories, and worse, my grandchildren would grow up believing I didn't care enough to fight for them. That thought was unbearable. I started documenting everything, every message, every ignored call, every incident where I was excluded or painted as unstable. As women, we're often told to keep the peace, to stay quiet, to not make things worse. But silence had already cost me everything. I spoke to a family counselor on my own, not to start a war, but to understand my options. She listened carefully and said something that shook me. You're being systematically isolated. Hearing it framed that way made me realize this wasn't just family drama. It was emotional manipulation. Around that time, I ran into Lily's sister at a community event. She looked uncomfortable seeing me, but after some small talk, she quietly told me something that confirmed my worst fears. Lily had always been afraid of being replaced, of not being enough, of losing control. She had complained for years about mothers and law, about women who can't let go. And slowly, deliberately, she had positioned me as the enemy so she could secure her place without competition. It wasn't personal in the way I'd thought. It was strategic. That knowledge didn't bring me peace. It brought me anger. A cold, focused anger that comes when you realize your kindness has been mistaken for weakness. And this is where I want to pause and talk directly to you, because this was the moment I stood at a crossroads. I had a choice. I could keep trying to appease, to apologize for crimes I didn't commit, to beg for scraps of affection. Or I could finally stand up for myself, knowing full well that doing so might cost me even more. So that's the situation I was in. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself honestly, if you were a woman in my position, cut off from your child and grandchildren, blamed for everything, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you risk becoming the villain to reclaim your truth? Tell me what you would have done in my shoes. I chose not to stay silent. I requested a mediated family meeting through the counselor and made it clear that I would no longer accept indirect communication or accusations behind my back. Adam reluctantly agreed. Lily did not, at least not at first. But when Adam insisted, she finally complied, though I could tell she believed she would come out looking reasonable and calm, while I would look emotional and unstable. She underestimated me. Walking into that room, sitting across from my son and the woman who had slowly erased me, I felt years of swallowed words rising in my throat. But I stayed calm. I spoke clearly. I laid out facts, not feelings. I asked Adam directly if he wanted me permanently out of his life. I asked Lily to explain, in specific terms, what boundaries I had violated, and for the first time, the story they'd been telling started to fall apart. Lily spoke in generalities. Adam struggled to justify decisions he hadn't fully made himself. The counselor noticed it too. That meeting didn't end with hugs or apologies, but it cracked the illusion. Adam started asking questions he hadn't asked before, and Lily realized something dangerous. I wasn't going to disappear quietly anymore. What she did after that meeting, though, was far more extreme than anything I expected. And it's what led directly to the confrontation that changed our family forever. The moment where everything exploded into the open, and there was no pretending left for anyone involved. What Lily did after that meeting still feels surreal when I think about it, because it showed me just how far someone will go when they feel their control slipping. 2 days after the mediation session, Adam called me for the first time in months. His voice sounded strained, almost panicked. He told me Lily was furious, that she felt attacked and humiliated, and that she was saying I was trying to turn him against her. I listened quietly, letting him talk, because for the first time he wasn't accusing me. He was confused. That confusion was the crack she hadn't planned for. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. Lily had threatened to leave with the kids if he didn't cut me off completely and permanently. Not just no visits, no calls, no pictures, no updates, total erasure. She told him that my presence was damaging her mental health and that any contact with me meant he was choosing me over his own family. Hearing that felt like being stabbed, not just by her, but by the realization that my son was being emotionally cornered. As a woman, I understood exactly what she was doing. She was weaponizing motherhood, positioning herself as the fragile victim and me as the dangerous outsider. Adam admitted he didn't know what to do. He said he felt like he was being forced to choose between his wife and his mother, and that pressure was crushing him. I told him something I had never said before, something I had always avoided because I didn't want to burden him. I told him I would never ask him to choose, that loving me didn't mean betraying her, that healthy families don't require ultimatums. I could hear him crying on the other end of the phone, and that sound alone told me how deeply trapped he was. The situation escalated quickly after that. Lily blocked me on everything, social media, phone, even email. I later found out she told Adam she felt unsafe around me, a claim so absurd it would have been laughable if it hadn't been so devastating. That word, unsafe, is powerful. It paints someone as a threat without requiring proof, and it worked. Adam became distant again, pulled back by fear and guilt, torn between logic and loyalty. The real explosion came when Lily contacted a lawyer. She didn't file anything official, but she made sure the message reached me. If I attempted any further contact, she would pursue a restraining order. That threat shook me to my core. I had spent my life avoiding conflict, bending, apologizing, shrinking, and now I was being treated like a criminal for wanting to love my family. That was the moment something hardened inside me, not into hatred, but into clarity. I realized that no matter how gentle I was, she would always portray me as a threat, as long as I existed outside her control. So I did the one thing she hadn't prepared for. I stopped reacting emotionally, and I started protecting myself. I hired my own lawyer, not to attack, but to defend my right to exist in my family's story. I documented everything. I asked for all communication to go through legal channels. When Lily found out, she panicked. Control only works when the other person stays unarmed. Adam, seeing how far this had gone, finally began to wake up. He started asking himself why his wife was so desperate to silence me. Why love had to be proven through isolation. Why peace required erasing someone who had never harmed them. One night, he showed up at my door unannounced, eyes red, shoulders slumped, looking like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. He told me he felt like he was losing himself, that he didn't recognize his life anymore. I held him while he cried, and for the first time in years, I felt like his mother again, not a problem to be managed. That visit changed everything. Lily found out and erupted. She accused him of betrayal, of choosing me, of breaking her trust. She packed bags and took the kids to her sister's house. And this time, Adam didn't chase her immediately. That was the moment the power shifted. For the first time, her threats didn't work the way they used to. The aftermath was messy, painful, and slow. They entered couples counseling. Boundaries were discussed, but this time they were real, mutual, not weapons. Lily was forced to confront her insecurities instead of projecting them onto me. Adam began rebuilding a relationship with me cautiously, carefully, like someone relearning how to walk after a long injury. I didn't gloat. I didn't say I told you so. I focused on healing, not winning. I was allowed to see my grandchildren again, supervised at first, then more freely. The first time my granddaughter ran into my arms again, I cried so hard I could barely breathe. She whispered, "I missed you, Grandma," like it was a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to say. That alone made every sleepless night worth it. Nothing went back to the way it was before, and maybe that's a good thing. Illusions were shattered, roles were redefined. Lily and I will never be close, and I've accepted that. But I am no longer erased. I am no longer silent. And my son now understands something crucial. Love is not a limited resource, and anyone who asks you to prove it by destroying another relationship is not asking for love, but control. Looking back, I know that standing up for myself changed the course of my life. It cost me peace in the short term, but it gave me dignity in the long term. And while the scars of that period will always remain, they remind me of something powerful, that as women, especially mothers, we are allowed to take up space, to defend our place in our families, and to refuse to be erased for someone else's comfort. Even now, sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I reread that message my son sent me, the one that told me not to come to his house anymore, and it feels like it was written in another lifetime. So much damage came from that single sentence. And yet, without it, I might never have found the strength to finally stand up for myself. The truth is, this experience taught me something painful but necessary. Loving someone doesn't mean allowing yourself to be erased. As women, especially as mothers, we're often expected to sacrifice endlessly, to swallow our hurt in the name of peace. But peace built on silence is not peace at all. It's surrender. Adam and I are still rebuilding our relationship. Some days are good, some days are awkward, and some days bring back old wounds. But there is honesty now, and honesty is a foundation we never had before. Lily remains a part of his life, and I accept that reality without trying to control it. I don't need her approval to know who I am. I'm a mother who loved fiercely, a grandmother who refused to disappear, and a woman who finally learned that boundaries go both ways. I no longer beg for space in anyone's life. If I'm there, it's because I'm wanted, not because I've shrunk myself small enough to be tolerated. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's that control often disguises itself as peace, and guilt often disguises itself as love. If someone asks you to prove your love by cutting off someone else who hasn't harmed you, that's not loyalty, that's manipulation. I wish I had understood that sooner, but I'm grateful I understand it now. So tell me, honestly, after hearing my story, was I wrong for refusing to disappear? Was I wrong for standing my ground and protecting my place in my family? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I know so many women are silently living through something similar, wondering if they're the problem when they're really just being pushed aside. If you were on my side in this story, please like this video. It helps more than you know. Subscribe to the channel for more real, emotional stories like this. Stories that don't shy away from the messy truth of family and love. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who feels like they're being erased, share this story with them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you all in the next story.